Hello, I'm Roger Baker, Executive Director of the Stratfor Center for Applied Geopolitics at RANE. This podcast is brought to you by RANE Worldview, the premier digital publication for objective geopolitical intelligence and analysis. Find out how RANE can help you stay ahead of global events at ranenetwork.com.
You're listening to RANE's Essential Geopolitics podcast. In this episode, we'll be talking about Pakistan, which has been facing significant economic challenges, so significant that they helped foster a change in government back in May. But the country's new government may face its own economic risks. Here with details of what's happening in Pakistan is Ekta Raghuwanshi. She is RANE's South Asia analyst. Welcome, Ekta.
Hello, Emily.
Maybe we can talk a little bit about Pakistan's economic situation. Exactly how serious is it?
Oh yes, glad to. So quite serious, at least in the region, in South Asian region, after Sri Lanka, Pakistan is the next country that is vulnerable to a default. Many international creditors have already assessed it could in fact go into a default if certain things do not happen in the very near future. The problems in Pakistan, much like in Sri Lanka, precede the current crisis, which has been only exacerbated by the Russian war on Ukraine and the resultant price rise of essential imports like oil, food products, and all other essential commodities. Since Pakistan is heavily dependent on imports, high-priced imports have essentially depleted its foreign exchange reserves. In case of Pakistan, only in the past 3 months, the currency has depreciated about 20%. And there's only about $9 billion in the currency in the country's foreign reserves, which is only enough to import about for the next 5 or 6 weeks, according to some estimates, of course. In the very recent time, the government has had to reduce the subsidies that it provided on fuel and other things. So the inflation in the country has been already on record levels in double digits, about 30%. It's been a grim situation in the country. Pakistan is also facing difficulties in procuring liquid LNG, which is used for electricity generation in the country, because there's just a shortage in the international markets and the prices are so high. All of these problems are very similar to what we saw when the crisis in Sri Lanka was starting. So I would say the problem in Pakistan is very severe. It is also currently talking with the IMF and trying to resume the bailout program that it has been under since 2019. So it is heavily dependent on external international lenders and bilateral relations, other countries, for taking it out of this crisis. So I would again say it's a serious situation in Pakistan.
It is serious, and it's not a wealthy country to begin with, right? So we're talking about people really suffering, are we?
Oh yes, I would say the outlook for economic activity in the country looks grim already, because the investing climate is very it's not looking up for Pakistan. Of course, the dollar bonds in the international markets have been at all-time low. So of course I don't expect much rush for people to do business in Pakistan in the near future. Other than that, the everyday disruptions like power cuts, shortage of fuel in the short term will greatly hamper whatever economic activity is currently in the country.
Ekta, let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned Sri Lanka. It sounds like what you've described make the current government quite vulnerable, not just economically, but politically. Could something like Sri Lanka happen here?
Oh, yes, there are, of course, parallels to be drawn politically also in case of Pakistan. As you did mention when we were talking about, when we started talking about this, that the current government was installed only in May. And just to remind our listeners, the government was installed after a very famous ouster of the previous Prime Minister Imran Khan, based on the economic situation in the country, very poor economic health in the country. Inflation was all-time high, because of which people were unhappy, and the opposition just took this chance, and there was a change of government. What happened now is the new government has continued to face those economic pressures. It is under extreme pressure to resume the IMF program to get the next tranche of about $1 to $2 billion. But for that, it had the new government had to implement unpopular economic measures like I mentioned, reducing the subsidy on fuel. So the fuel prices, electricity rates increased. They had to impose new taxes on the recent budget. So for people, for the country, these pressures have still been there, and this has really affected the popularity of the new government. The new government, which is a ruling, it's a coalition of different parties. It looks like it's very, very unpopular in the country because of the economic situation.
So what you're describing is a significant political vulnerability. In fact, former PM Imran Khan's party had a big victory in a recent provincial election. I assume that that's some kind of mirror for the larger situation?
It is. So although Imran Khan was ousted because the economic situation was poor, the current government obviously did not deliver on its promises that the situation would be alleviated, not even become better in this current scenario. The win of Imran Khan in Punjab province is significant in number of ways. One, it shows that the current government is unpopular, of course. The win in Punjab is significant because Punjab was traditionally the stronghold of the current ruling party, PMLN. So that's other thing to consider. Also, Imran Khan has been very, very successful in galvanizing, in just getting people out on the streets, given after the fact that he was ousted so famously from the country. So there is this shift of public perception of this new government. Many leaders in the new government have past corruption cases against them, and many voters are not happy about that also. So there are those past grievances, plus the current situation does not seem like it's getting better anytime soon. The country is still very, very highly dependent on countries like China, like Saudi Arabia, for loans, for debt rollovers, and of course the IMF bailout program. So yes, the resurgence of PTI, of Imran Khan's party, just makes things worse for the current government, which is only trying to ride out its term till 2023. So the next general elections in Pakistan are expected to be before October 2023. However, there are actually increasing calls of just preponing those elections because people just do not have confidence in the new leaders. The new government is a coalition government, and you never know about factionalism in the new government because of its unpopularity in the country. So the political crisis, economic crisis, like in the case of Sri Lanka, is completely intertwined, and in Pakistan that's what we're watching.
Wow, that is a lot to watch. Thank you for that analysis, Ekta.
Thank you.
Understanding geopolitics, like what's going on in Pakistan, is critical to future planning, whether you run a multinational conglomerate or you're just planning a trip to someplace you've never been. That's why we created the Essential Geopolitics podcast. But more than that, RANE offers businesses a complete geopolitical intelligence solution with RANE Worldview. Worldview for Enterprises delivers forward-looking, enterprise-level analysis tools that enhance your ability to understand what's about to happen. Learn more about RANE's geopolitical intelligence solution at ranenetwork.com. That's RANE network.com. I'm Emily Donahue. Thanks for listening.